The point and shoot market that many of us thought were dead is springing back to life, and it really does seem to be a generational thing. Where older photographers consider the smartphone the tool that would kill the point and shoot camera, younger generations are picking this up to expand their photographic horizons beyond what the phone can do. But is there still a place for these cameras? Well, Panasonic has just released its brand new ZS99, and we're going to answer that question. I'm Chris Niccolls, this is PetaPixel, let's go find out. But what is the Panasonic ZS99? I mean, this is basically a compact camera with an incredible zoom range. This gives you a 24 to 720 millimeter full frame equivalent field of view. That's a 30 times zoom. Now, I feel like I've seen this camera before, and that's because it's very similar to the ZS80. And this was also called the TZ95 in other circles. It's supposed to be travel zoom, which I think actually makes a lot more sense, but ZS it is. So one of the ways in which the ZS99 is identical to the older ZS80 series is at the heart of this camera, we still have the same 20 megapixel 1/2.3 size sensor. Now, this is roughly comparable to smartphone sensors, a little bit smaller than the main phone camera, a little bit bigger than what you'll find with the telephoto camera, however, and this is what makes it so possible to fit such a big zoom range into such a small camera. Now, one of the major improvements here on the ZS99, it is now USB-C compliant, and that is very important because people want to market this camera now for European markets where that's an absolute requirement. At the same time, though, there's something missing, and to me, it's a major loss, and that's that we've got no electronic viewfinder anymore. So I'm just waiting to see if these squirrels will do something. They're all very skittish around here, but having a zoom range like this reminds me of kind of like the fun convenience of being able to shoot really pictures of birds and squirrels as I walk around, but like at will, because I've got this reach. I can just reach out and get shots. It's like having the most professional wildlife camera in your pocket that doesn't take professional looking images. Not bad though. I take it back, this camera is an amazing wildlife camera. I have just spotted some very rare iridescent deer. Oh, nice. Damn it. My shadow's in the shot. The sunlight's at the perfect angle to wreck my photo. So this lens flares a little bit, so I'm going to do the one-handed hold and one-handed shade. Get rid of that flare. So we've seen a real market now for used point and shoots. People buying these up, prices getting inflated, and so now the manufacturers seem to be jumping on and making new point and shoots, but are they really new? I mean, Leica did something here with the Deluxe 8, which was very similar to the original Deluxe 7. I mean, basically the same camera re-released for all intents and purposes. Now Panasonic ZS99 is doing a similar thing here. It's very similar in handling to the original ZS80, although as I mentioned, there is a lack of an EVF. In fact, that makes this camera body slightly lighter. From 328 grams, we're now down to 322 grams. I guess that's the weight of an EVF. I know we're going to talk about that in a bit. Otherwise, though, everything is very familiar. The handling is basically identical. Same nice grip with the rubberized finish on here. Same design where a finger can very easily go over the flash and completely block it, rendering it pointless. It does have a nice mode dial on top because this camera does give you some manual controls, and that is something I do appreciate. Having program mode, aperture, shutter priority, and manual, and having, yes, somewhat limited control over my aperture, but certainly control over shutter speed and ISO does give me some creative control. So the control structure for those aforementioned manual controls is actually quite nice on a camera like this. I mean, first off, we've got a really customizable front control ring. It actually turns really smoothly. You can use this for a lot of things like aperture or exposure control or manual focusing. You also have a terrible dial on the back. It's that very basic plastic dial that's hard to spin without accidentally pushing something like exposure compensation or flash controls, but at least we do have dual controls there. Otherwise, the layout is very similar to what we've seen before. Quick menu button, playback, display, but we do now have an additional button which is for sending files automatically to your smartphone. Now for ports, we have micro HDMI port, and we do have that new USB-C port, which again is a nice thing to have. I just wish it wasn't in lieu of an EVF. Here on the bottom of the camera, we have the exact same Panasonic BLG10 PP battery we've had for a long time, and it gives us the exact same SEPA-rated 380 shots without the EVF like we would have gotten on the older ZS80 camera. And of course, as befits any point-and-shoot camera, just a single SD card slot there on the bottom, which makes perfect sense. Now, if you've used a camera like this in the past, you know that the aperture choices you have are pretty limited. The maximum tight aperture on this camera is f8. You can't go beyond that, and even then, you're basically diffraction limited. You're gonna get tons of depth of field anyways. This is an f3.3 aperture at 24 millimeters, an f6.4 aperture at 720 millimeters. So again, you don't have a ton of choice when it comes to depth of field, and this isn't really the kind of camera that gives you shallow depth of field. And that is something that a smartphone actually has as a distinct advantage. Even though it is a fake representation of depth of field, it is quite convincing nowadays. So doing things like portrait mode with that really shallow depth of field, that's something a phone can do, and this really can. So of course, I don't expect a camera like this to have advanced tracking autofocus. It really doesn't, but it does have very good DFD contrast-based detect autofocus. And I mean, it is actually very fast. It's very snappy. I can use the touch screen to move my control around where I want to autofocus, and it's very easy and straightforward, very snappy, very quick, as you can see there. Okay, so let's talk displays now. So we have the exact same display that we had on the original ZS80, but it's a good display. 3-inch screen, 1.84 million dots resolution, full touchscreen compatible, so I can navigate menus, I can autofocus the camera really easily. It does tilt, but only in one axis, just vertically up for selfie shots. That's kind of nice for people who want to vlog or do selfie stuff, but if I'm trying to do portraits of Jordan, he's so tall and I got my hand cranked here, I wish I could tilt it backwards, but I can't. And I will say in bright sunlight like we have today, it's a little bit hard to see sometimes, which is why I'm really missing the EVF, and that is unfortunate. I mean, the EVF gives us a few advantages. First off, in a bright day, I can see very clearly with my eye up to that EVF. More importantly though, we do have a really big zoom range, and at 720 millimeters, it's nice to have that telephoto reach to really be able to zoom in, bring that to my eye, and get the stability of holding the camera against my face as opposed to holding it out here at arm's length. At the same time as well, I'm not getting any younger, and I would appreciate having the EVF with diopter control, but I do get that the younger generation, maybe they don't care about these things as much. I mean, just having this big zoom range, it's a huge difference from a smartphone. The creeper potential is off the charts. Oh, it's Santa Claus. Actually, this is a really good idea. We're gonna shoot Santa Claus here while he's standing there, motionless, much like a mannequin would, and we're gonna use this as a test to see the telephoto difference between this camera and a smartphone. Okay, so for our test here, we're gonna shoot the iPhone 16 Pro with its 5x telephoto camera. This is giving us roughly 120 millimeter full frame equivalent. Get a picture of Santa Claus here, he's being very cooperative. Then we take the same shot at 120 millimeters on the Panasonic ZS99. Now you can see here, when we zoom in, pretty similar image quality. I'd still give the edge to the Panasonic, a little bit more detail, but you know, it's pretty similar. Here's where the big difference is. I can now zoom into 720 millimeters, get just Santa's face, look at that detail that's retained in comparison. The iPhone 16, if I was gonna zoom in, it just falls apart completely. And this is where a point-and-shoot camera excels over a smartphone and gives us something truly unique. Now, as far as point-and-shoot cameras go, I mean, this is very similar, again, as I say, to the ZS80. In fact, we're actually losing some features like the panoramic stitch mode and the skin retouching beauty filter, which I'm fine without. But we still get a lot of the great fast 4K burst rate mode. So things like 4K selfie, there's also 4K photo mode. These are things where the camera shoots basically 8 megapixel JPEG only, but at 30 frames per second. And that can really help you get a shot where you don't care about resolution as much as just getting that decisive moment. You also have classic features like Panasonic's post focus, where it'll take multiple shots and then you can click the areas you want to be in focus or not in focus, you know, just basically focus stacking. That can be handy for little macro shots as well. And on that same topic, this camera does do decent macro shots because of the smaller sensor. So you zoom to 24 millimeters, your working distance is basically nothing. You're almost touching the front of the lens, but you can do some nice close-up shots if you want as well. So of course, one thing that people are really gonna want if they're coming from a smartphone going to a point-and-shoot camera is a still very convenient experience to be able to shoot photos on the camera, get it to your phone, and share it very easily. So connectivity has improved, although it is quite slight. So we still have the same 2.4 gigahertz Wi-Fi that we had on the previous camera. The Bluetooth has improved from 4.2 to 5.0. Yeah, I mean, a little bit less power consumption, maybe a little bit faster data rate transfer, longer distances you can be at, but I think in actual practical terms, we're not going to see much difference. So the ZS99 is just about to hit market, but we don't quite still have compatibility fully with the app, so we can't really test it fully. But suffice to say, the Panasonic Image app will let you download photos either through Wi-Fi really quickly or even just as you're shooting right to your phone through the app via Bluetooth. You can also do things like fire the camera remotely, change exposure and stuff. So it's pretty handy if you want to have that connectivity. So one nice thing about the ZS99 is it does shoot RAW, and that does give me the option to boost shadows a little bit, bring down highlights. I'm going to turn some of these photos to black and white, but we have to remember that we're still talking about a very small sensor, not a ton of dynamic range. The image quality we're getting here is the same image quality we got in 2019, and to be honest, that image quality was the same image quality we were getting for years before that, so don't expect any Christmas miracles. So of course we have the exact same lens and sensors before. That means we have the exact same video quality, and it's unfortunately not very good. Okay, so yeah, you do get full manual control. Jordan's struggling right now with the fact that there's no ND filters to speak of, but you get 4K at 30 frames per second. That is cropping down, though, just the middle 8 megapixels out of that 20 megapixel sensor. So it's roughly a 1.5 times crop factor on that. You don't get any sort of log profile, of course. There's not even a 709-like profile at all. So things are going to be a little bit over sharpened, a little bit contrasty. You can shoot 60p at 1080, and you can shoot 120p at 720. So we're taking a few steps back in the video quality game, and obviously your phone's going to do a way better job. Now, of course, there's no audio mic input. You're just going to be relying on the built-in mic. We're doing separate sound sync with the Panasonic GH7 just so that it sounds good. And of course, you are going to get that long telephoto reach. I mean, we've talked about a crop factor. You do have the big zoom lens reach there. The stabilization can only help you out so much, though. Remember that when you're recording video, this camera's going to have tons of rolling shutter. You got to be as stable as possible. And I'd really be very conservative about how far I push that telephoto zoom. The only thing I could see over a smartphone would be if you really want to do that creeper long lens and get video in those situations, but otherwise, I think a smartphone is going to be a way better tool. So I have to admit, using this camera today, this Panasonic ZS99 has been a really enjoyable experience, but I think for me, it comes from more of a place of nostalgia. I mean, as a younger photographer, of course, these were ubiquitous and I shot a lot of them. And I mean, this technology really hasn't changed. This feels a lot like what I used even 8 or 9 years ago, to be honest. And so I hope that for me, that nostalgic experience would translate into a fun experience for somebody starting out or coming from a smartphone that wants to have a compact camera that has a little bit more capability. At the same time, though, I have to say this. In my opinion, if you're going to carry a compact camera around like this and you want to differentiate it from your smartphone experience, it really has to be one of two kinds of cameras. First off, I really think it's got to be either a larger sensor camera with brighter aperture lenses, more manual control, even something as extreme as like a Fujifilm X100 series camera or a Leica Q3 kind of camera to really separate itself. I feel like if you just get a compact point and shoot camera with a slow lens, your smartphone can replicate a lot of that, surpass in a lot of ways, and actually give you better image quality. Or it has to be what this camera represents, a compact camera that gives you a tremendous zoom range. You know, this is the ability to really reach out and shoot long distances. And if you're gonna do that a lot, and I have to say I have been today, then you get something that a smartphone also can't touch. So normally I try to end my videos on a bit of an upswing, you know, silver lining kind of thing, but I'm actually gonna go the opposite way. And I'm gonna kind of go with the downer approach here. And maybe it is just my perspective being an older photographer and having used cameras like this already. I can't help but feel like the ZS99 is stripped down in a lot of ways. I mean, yeah, we get slightly faster Bluetooth connectivity. Honestly, it's not appreciable. The older cameras had fine connectivity. USB-C, great, and I get that for European markets that's essential, but in a selfish way for me here in North America, it's not changing my life at all. And really what I'm missing out on is that EVF, and so I feel like I'm getting a camera which is the same price, has the same capabilities, has the same image quality, and I'm losing a major function over the older ZS80. But at the same time, will a new user even care about those things or even notice that they're missing? Maybe not. And what they will absolutely appreciate is having a fantastic zoom range that zooms quick and actually focuses quite fast when you get there. And with the image stabilization in this body is actually a pretty stable platform to shoot from, even if you have to do it out here. Anyways, I hope you guys found this useful. Please leave those comments below, and we might even address them on the PetaPixel podcast. Search for it on all your favorite podcasting apps or watch it on this exact same channel. And while you're at it, as we approach the start of 2025, this is a great time to get a PetaPixel.com Pro membership. This way you get to enjoy PetaPixel.com ads-free, and there's lots of fun bonuses coming up in 2025. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you soon with more on PetaPixel.